In this, the fourth video in my tutorial series on how to create a 3D space shooter game in Unity, we're going to be importing some free assets from the Unity Asset Store that will allow us to create asteroids that can be blown up and shattered into smaller pieces with some really cool explosion effects. So follow along so you can see for yourself how easy it is to create asteroids and blow them up. Okay, so I think it's time we have something to shoot at. And to do that, I think I want to add some asteroids, and I also want to add some explosion effects. So there's a couple of assets on the asset store that are free. There's this detonator explosion framework. By the way, I believe this is the first ever asset that was added to the asset store, and they've been maintaining it for 10 years. But it's got some really cool explosion effects, and they're very robust. There's a lot of different types of effects, and they have a lot built in. And best of all, they're free. And also, these breakable asteroids look interesting. They're free as well. Essentially, they're asteroids that when you shoot them, they bust up into little component pieces. So that might be a pretty cool effect to add to the game. So if you haven't already, log into the Unity Asset Store and add those to your assets. So I'm already gotten them, but I just want you to see what it would look like. So once you've done that, if you go into Unity and into the package manager, you'll be able to find them under your assets. And I'm sorting by purchase date, so I'd find the two most recent ones. And just click on this download button. And we'll download those onto our hard drive. And then we can click import. And this will open up the import dialog. And you can be selective about what you want to import from here. I'm just going to go ahead and import everything. Except, do I want the PSD files? I just saw some. They're probably not that big. I'll go ahead and import them. So these are referring to an older API, and it will update them for us. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, now let's go down to the Breakable Asteroids, and we will download them. And we will import them. So there's a number of asteroids and rock fracture prefabs. There's a scene. Bunch of textures. Okay, we'll import those. All right, so now that we've got those assets, so we're going to want to drag them into our Asset Store Packages folder here. So let's just grab them and drag them. All right, so they're in there now. And let's look at the explosions first. I just want to take a look at them. So I know there was a sample scene. Looks like that's the scene right there. Okay, so let's hit play and see what happens. So there's this big wall of cubes over here. And it looks like we got a little button here where we can select different kinds of explosions. Looks like we have camera far, camera near. And so there's an explosion. Complete with sound effects. And I love the way it applies explosion force to that wall of cubes. Oh, cool. So they have a near sound and a far sound. Interesting. thought I saw one that said igniter. That's kind of interesting, though. Mushroom cloud. Okay. Those could be kind of cool. Chunks. Okay, I want to see the one that said igniter. So that's very cool. It sets the things on fire, it looks like. And oh, there's some cool smoke. Ooh. I could definitely see using that fire effect when our ship takes damage. Okay, so those are all pretty cool. Let's go take a look at the asteroids. Okay, so we got some ground here. We've got a bunch of different rocks, it looks like. Okay. And there's this massive explosion. Let's hit play. Okay, so what happens if we turn on this massive explosion? Oh, well, that's interesting. Oh, so there's a bunch of rock fracture items here. And if you open that up, there's a bunch of cells. Okay, so these rock fractures are basically rocks that have all their little component meshes. It's basically fractured into a bunch of different meshes. Let's take a look at this. So you got all these cells, and each cell has a mesh renderer with a mesh. It's got a mesh collider and a rigid body. And the rigid body has gravity on it, which is why they were falling. And I guess there's nothing really holding them together, so once they fall and hit the ground, they all break apart, which is what we saw in that. Let me turn all these off. I guess that's what we saw in the scene when we hit play. So they're falling, and they're all falling apart. Okay, so if we want to use these, we're going to have to turn the gravity off on all these individual rigid bodies that are on all these individual cells, and then apply explosion force at this. So what we would do is it looks like there's a corresponding fractured rock for every rock. So let's enable that and disable all of these. And I just want to get them side by side so I can kind of compare them. Looks like they're a massively different scale. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, so they are, there's a corresponding rock for every corresponding rock fracture. And so what I would do is when this guy was destroyed, I would just spawn one of these and then apply the explosion force to it to send the pieces flying. I think that would be a pretty cool effect. So let's get out and let's grab one of these asteroids. Grab rock 1. We'll just pull it into our scene and we'll zero it out. So it's right in front of our ship. Turn that ship off, and I'm going to unpack this prefab. And I'm going to go into our prefabs. I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call it asteroids. And I'll drag that guy in there. Okay, so I think all of that is cool. Let's add a rigid body to it. And turn off its gravity. That's probably all good. And create a script for it. Go into our script folder, create a folder. Call it asteroids. Create C# script. Asteroid. And I will drag that onto there. See, we're also going to want to drag in rock fracture 1. Unpack the prefab. And let's take a look at this guy. He's got all those cells. Now, I know I wanted to turn his gravity off. And we're going to want to have a little bit of drag if we're going to apply explosion force, because we don't want them to just go flying away forever. That should probably be good. It's got the mesh collider. That's all good. Oh, I know one thing I want to do. I want to put them on a layer. So right now, we haven't created any layers. So let's create, well, I guess we created a background layer. Let's create player projectile, player shield. We're going to have shields eventually. Enemy projectile, enemy shield, and asteroid. We may add some more later. So let's go back to our rock fracture and our rock, and we will select asteroid and apply it to all its children. We'll select our fighter, and we will select player, apply it to our children. And let's see. All right, what else do we want to do to this guy? I guess we can create a script for him. We will call it fractured asteroid. And we will drag that script onto him. All right, so let's go into our asteroid script. Let's add a serialized field, fractured asteroid, fractured asteroid prefab. Now, since we're going to want to be able to destroy this asteroid, I want to create a new interface, and I want to call it iDamageable. I'm going to let Rider create the interface, and I'm going to add a public void method, take damage. I want an integer for the amount of damage, and I think it would be really cool, like when the target is hit, that we spawn an explosion effect at the point where we hit it. So I'm going to add a vector 3 and call it hit position. And I'm going to let Rider move this to its own file. Okay. So I got that. All right, let's go back to our asteroid. And we will let Rider implement the missing member. So I have a take damage method. And so what do we want to do when we take damage? We want to fracture asteroid. And we will do it at the hit position. Oh. Create method. Okay, so we're going to want to, if fractured asteroid prefab is not equal to null, then we want to instantiate fractured asteroid prefab, and we want to do it at our current position. I'm going to cache our transform. And the awake method. We're going to do that at transform.position. And we will use transform.rotation. And then we want to have an explosion prefab. And I need a script for that. Let me go look at the script for the explosion. I don't think we created our prefab for the explosion. Let's go do that. Go down into our detonator package, prefab examples. I think I want to try this insanity one. I think maybe this tiny one. I'm eventually probably going to want this igniter one. That's probably enough for now. I'm going to unpack all these prefabs. And let's see, I want to create, actually there's probably already a script on them. There's a bunch of scripts on them. There's a detonator script, an object spray script, a heat wave script, sparks, shock, another shock wave, fire, a couple of fireball scripts, another object spray, oh, and a sound effect. Cool. Let's look at this one. Oh, it's got a force. Why doesn't this one have force? I wonder if this one extends. Does it apply force? Well, there's only one way to find out. So these already have scripts on them. Let's see. Detonator, detonator, detonator. They all have a detonator script, so that's what I can use. So let's take our prefabs here. Let's call this effects. And delete these and delete this. Oh, did I create a prefab for rock fracture? I did not. Okay. So let's go back into our asteroid. And add a serialized field, private detonator. It's not seeing the detonator script. I believe this is because early on in this series, you may recall, I created an assembly definition for our scripts. So let me go into the detonator. I'm going to create an assembly definition, and I will call this detonator. All right. And go back into my script. Serialized field, detonator. That's better. And we will call this explosion prefab. Okay, so if explosion prefab is not equal to null, then we want to instantiate the explosion prefab at the hit position, quaternion identity. And I think I want to try and add an inline editor. This is an optional Odin parameter. Let me see this. Boxed. Okay. So that should instantiate the explosion at the point where we hit the thing. And we're going to want to destroy the game object for this asteroid that we're fracturing. All right. So let's take a look. I don't know, do I need to do anything in rock fracture? I don't think so. I'll just go ahead and delete this for now. Oops. Go ahead and re-enable our fighter. So there's no overrides in here, so I can delete that. Let's go take a look at our prefab for our asteroid. We want to add the fractured prefab. And for our explosion prefab, let's try the insanity. We'll have to probably play around with some of these things. It will apply force. Man, there's a ton of settings. There are a ton of settings. All right. Let's just give it a shot. See what happens. Oh, wait a minute. We need to have an asteroid to shoot. Oh, and I see, I think I have another issue. In our camera, we want to make sure that we show player, player projectile, player shield, enemy, enemy. We need to display all these from the main camera. Not sure what that was about. And let's go ahead and give us a rock to shoot. Hit play. Whoa. Oh, we're hitting it. Wow, it's hard to hit. That's really weird. It seems like a lot of the projectiles are either missing it or passing through it. I think I'm going to need to make the colliders bigger on that projectile. But we're not handling the dealing damage yet. We're getting a collider message here. So all we're doing is we're displaying that. So what we're going to want to do, let's have this thing, oh, it already does deal a certain amount of damage. Cool. I think we don't need them to live so long. So instead of doing this, let's say I damageable. Actually, let's do this. Collision dot collider dot game object dot get component I damageable question mark dot take damage. Oh, you also want to have the position. All right, this line's getting really long, so let me do this. I damageable equals if damageable is not equal to null, vector 3 hit position equals collision dot get contact sub-0 dot contact, what's it, point yes, that gets us the vector 3 at the point of contact. And then we will say damageable dot take damage hit position. Okay. Whoa. Whoa, that was sweet. That was a lot of force though, man. It blew those pieces all over the place. I'm wondering if I should let those pieces live on as long as that though. Let me make this guy bigger. And I want to do something else. Let me go into my player projectile. Scale that guy up. and go into his collider and even make the collider bigger. Let me see, 1, 2, 2. Yeah, I like that. Did that explosion force push the ship back? I also want to decrease the size of the dead zone. It's too hard to control this thing. I think the explosion force did push the ship. And those pieces can disappear after a while. So I'm going to go into our rock fracture. We're not doing anything in here currently. So I will have a serialized field float duration. We'll say 10 seconds. And I will make this a range from 1 to 30 seconds. 60. Okay, and on enable. Actually, this is, I don't need to do this. This is all, I can just say destroy game object duration. Because you can pass a duration, a time to the destroy method. It's an optional parameter. All right. And eventually, like I think I said in the previous video, I'm going to be implementing object pooling. Although object pooling these fractured asteroids could get tricky because of all those child cells, and I need to put them all back together in their original state to reuse those things, because they get spewed all over the place when we apply the explosion. But we can do it. That would be a good lesson, I think. You know, I can't really see the pieces because the explosion's so strong. Let me look at that prefab for the asteroid. And look at our explosion. Of course, we're only looking at the detonator, but there was a ton of other things on that explosion. I don't know that any of them affected the shock force, the force that's being applied. So I know there was this auto create force. Let's go look at their code. There's a private variable here for force. So it's going to add a component to it at runtime called detonator force. It's using velocity. Start velocity. I wonder where that's coming from. It must be coming from that detonator force component. Oh, here we are. They hide it in the inspector. Start values, vector 3 velocity. I wonder if it's a factor of the size. You got the size here. You can play around with that. Make this 5. Although I probably shouldn't change it there. I should probably change it on the asteroid. Let's see. I'm going to back up a little bit. For some reason, every time I fire, it's jerking my ship up. Oh, I think it's recoil from the I know why. I know why. If we come and look at our log here, well, I thought it was going to be telling me that there was a collision. Oh, I took that comment out. I took that debug log out. But if we go into our project settings under physics, our projectile is colliding with the player. So we want player projectiles to collide with, oh, here we go. Player, don't want to collide, don't want to collide, don't want to collide. So the player projectile will collide with asteroids, enemy shields, enemy projectiles, and enemies. Let's see. Asteroids should only, well, they might need that for the explosion force. Did it need to collide with other asteroids? I don't know. Let's see. Enemy shields should only collide with players, player projectiles, player shields. Okay. This is just a little bit of tedious work. Do we only have to do once? All right, I think that should do. Let's go ahead and hit play. Back up. There we go. No more obnoxious recoil. Man, it's hard to aim this thing. It needs to be bigger to send those rocks scattering around, and then they all disappeared. Let's make it a 8. Actually, I don't want to do it here. Like I said, let's go back into our rock, and right here, make it an 8. Hit play. Back up just a little bit. Cool. And they're far enough away now that if they disappear, it should be fine. Actually, what I could do is I could have them, the individual cells, see if they're visible to any camera. I want to shoot it on the top of the asteroid and see if the explosion force goes differently. Dang, where did those pieces go? I think I was so close they went behind me or something. Oh, they're just falling. Or just because I shot them on the top, it blew all the pieces down. So I wonder if I do want to use the hit position for the explosion. I think I do, but let's see. Maybe I don't. Let me go into the script, and instead of using hit position here, I'm going to use transform.position. So it should go from the center of the asteroid, no matter where I hit it. Oh, yeah. I definitely think that's better. Maybe I'll make the timeout a little bit longer. So that was on the fractured asteroid. Make it 30 seconds. All right. Well, I think I am liking that quite a bit. I think in the next video, I'm going to create an asteroid spawner, an asteroid field, which will spawn asteroids in a field around a point in space. And we can fly around through the field and blow up asteroids. I think that about wraps it up for this video. Be sure to tune in to the next video where we show how to create an asteroid spawner where we can spawn an entire field of asteroids to fly around and blow up. And if we have time, we might even create some more prefabs for some variety of asteroids instead of this single rock that we have now. And if you have any other suggestions or questions or comments, drop a comment down here and I'll do my best to get back to as soon as I can. And if you found this useful, and I really hope you did, do me a favor and click the like and subscribe button. It really does help me to grow my channel, and I want to get this content in front of as many people as possible. So thanks so much for watching, and good luck on your game development journey.